This person asks, free will or God's plan for your life? It cannot be both. I wonder if this person is familiar with the theological theory known as Molinism. Molinism is named after a 16th century Jesuit priest named Luis de Molina. Molina maintained that there are three logical moments to God's knowledge: God's natural knowledge, God's middle knowledge, and God's free knowledge. Each type of knowledge follows logically posterior after the other. God's natural knowledge is his knowledge of everything that could happen, everything that a free creature could do in any given circumstance. It's also his knowledge of all necessary truths, such as 1 plus 1 equals 2. God's middle knowledge is his knowledge of everything that a free creature would freely choose to do in any given set of circumstances. So God knows, for example, um, if Bob were to go to Tatsuki's Japanese restaurant, he would freely choose to order sushi. Or if Evan Minton were given $2,000 worth of Kindle gift cards, he would download all of the books on his Goodreads to-read list. God had these two logical moments of knowledge logically prior to his decision to create any world. Logically prior to his decision to create the universe, God knew everything that could happen and everything that would happen. Everything a person could freely do and everything a person would freely do if he were in any given circumstance. Now, God's free knowledge is his knowledge of everything that will actually happen. Free knowledge is synonymous with foreknowledge. This knowledge is the knowledge of future events. And it's this knowledge is God's free knowledge is the result of his sovereign choice about which of the numerous feasible worlds to actualize that God knew about in his middle knowledge. Now, on Molinism, God can sovereignly orchestrate all of human history without having to interfere with human libertarian free will. And we can see this, for example, in the crucifixion of Jesus. If God has middle knowledge, then he knew which persons to put in those positions in the first century to get Jesus crucified. He knew that if Caiaphas were high priest in the first century, then he would freely choose to condemn Jesus on grounds of blasphemy. And he would freely choose to take Jesus to Pilate for execution. God knew that if Pontius Pilate were prefect in the first century, then he would freely choose to comply with the demands of the crowds and would freely choose to hand Barabbas over to them rather than Jesus. And he knew that the crowd would freely choose to demand, give us Barabbas, and with Jesus, crucify him. God knew that if Judas were born in the time and place that he actually was born in, then he would freely choose to betray Jesus, and so on. God knew that all of these characters, all of these persons would freely choose to do what they did if they were in these circumstances. Now, someone may ask, well, what if they chose differently? What if Pilate chose not to give Barabbas over to the crowd? What if he chose to let Jesus free? Or what if Judas chose not to betray Jesus for 30 pieces of silver? Well, in this case, God could he could choose to create different persons in those circumstances in order to get the crucifixion carried out. And we know that the crucifixion is important because Jesus is dying to atone for the sins of the world, as 1 John 2:2 and John 3:16 and 1 Peter 3:8 say. I think the book of Jonah is another good example of God using his libertarian free will of God using his mental knowledge to get people to do what he wants them to do. God knew if my prophet Jonah preaches to Nineveh, they would freely choose to repent. And he also knew if I tell Jonah to repent to Nineveh, he would freely choose to flee to Tarshish. And if I cause a storm to rage where Jonah is on the ship, he would freely conclude that I'm doing it because he disobeyed me. And, and the people on the boat would freely throw him overboard. And if the people on the boat throw Jonah overboard, then a whale would, or a fish, great fish, would eat him, and Jonah would freely choose to change his mind. I like to bring up this example because Calvinists, who believe in exhaustive divine determinism, that's the view that God causally determines everything that occurs, like a grand cosmic puppet master. They often use the example of Jonah to say, well, you don't really have free will. Jonah didn't have free will. Well, Jonah could have had free will, and God could have gotten his means accomplished through this Molinistic account. So do we have free will, or is everything predestined? Well, for me as a Molinist, I think the answer is yes, it's both. I believe in destiny, and I also believe that it is up to me what I choose to have for lunch today. Whether I choose to make this TikTok or not.